Welcome to Brokers Digest, a weekly webcast by The Edge Singapore, where we discover stock opportunities with you. This episode is made possible by TD Ameritrade Singapore.
Welcome to another episode of The Edge Singapore's Brokers Digest with me, Amala Balakrishna. Joining me today is Leonard Ng, Manager for the Trade Desk of TD Ameritrade Singapore. Hi Leonard, welcome to the show.
Hi Amala, thanks for having me.
We're happy to have you with us today. So I've actually been really looking forward to today's discussion on how the outcome of the upcoming US presidential election will affect the stock market in the short term, especially since things have been heating up over the past few weeks. So just last week, the 30 stock Dow Jones index closed down 0.95%, while the S&P 500 was down 0.53%, making this its first decline in 4 weeks. Similarly, the Nasdaq index inched down 1.06% from the week before. Now, Leonard, this is quite a deviation from the increases to the indices seen in the previous weeks. Does this take you by surprise?
No, not really. So building up to the election, probably the investors are taking a pause on the sidelines first before seeing what happens from next Tuesday onwards. So I'm not surprised by this.
So as we near election day, how do you reckon the markets will perform? So are there any specific counters that you encourage our viewers to keep tabs on?
I don't have specific counters itself, but more of a sectorial approach in which, as we want to look back into history to see how does the sectors perform during either a Trump administration or during a like the most recent Obama administration. So we look back history to see how the sectors perform.
Right. So which are these sectors that you would suggest maybe we can touch on that in our discussion for today, especially since the markets have been so volatile? I'm curious to know how they will perform after the election as well. So like you mentioned, I think it will really depend on whether it's a Trump or a Biden win, because that will influence the kind of policies that will be implemented. Isn't that so, Leonard?
Correct. So the Economics 101 would say that the monetary policy will be controlled and managed by the Federal Reserve, but then the government, or be it the Biden or the Trump administration, will be influencing the fiscal policies instead of the US economies. So that would say that the incoming US government will influence the macroeconomic outlook, where they to look at where they earn from the country itself in terms of their budget and where they spend their budget. So that's where we have to look what they promise during their campaign speech and during their debates.
Right, right. So maybe we could just jump into a more sectoral discussion right now, if that's okay with you. So if I could just get you to gaze into the crystal ball and possibly tell us, how do you reckon tech stocks, especially those working in the highly anticipated 5G technology, will perform? Now, why I'm zeroing in on this sector specifically is because I think the COVID crisis has really put this sector into the limelight, and it's exacerbated the developments that the sector has been bringing on. So what are your thoughts on this, and how do you think the different administrations will affect their performance in the short term?
So tech stocks, or the tech sector, is part of the infrastructure package that both sides would want to introduce. So Trump has been eyeing a $1 trillion infrastructure package that would target roads, bridges, public transport, things, physical objects that connects people and places. And that includes the digital domain, which is the 5G network infrastructure. So usually the stocks that build and supply the materials for these projects, be it the construction side or the digital technology side, would directly benefit from a win from Trump. So this is on the back of over 740 million in spending reduction. So somewhere must give up some resources in order for the infrastructure package to go forward. So that spending reduction comes across a wide range of programs like the healthcare, the education, and social welfare that will take the cut from there.
Right. Thanks, Leonard, for that. So we touched upon the Trump administration. Now, you also I understand that the Biden administration will also be keen to inject some funding into this 5G and technology domain that the US is focusing on as well. So, how do you reckon that the Biden administration will affect their policies will affect this sector going forward?
Sure. So as you can see, Biden's campaign promise will be more R&D funding will be directed towards like 5G, artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and some of the green aspects which we will touch on later. So one example would be looking after the every worker itself. So to reopen successfully the economy, Biden recently released a plan to have every worker to be federally funded for their testing before going back to work. And then he also guaranteed paid sick leave for workers affected by COVID-19. So you can see from this in terms of the efforts and resources put into getting the PPE, getting the equipment, therapeutic drugs. So that is where Biden comes in, and then what it translates to the sectorial side of things will be the impact on biotech firms, the big pharma, and then the satellite sectors that is surrounding the healthcare sector.
Right, thanks, Leonard. So I think it really seems to me that the Trump administration is focusing on the businesses and a businessman approach that he has, possibly because he's a businessman himself. And the Biden administration is focusing more on the hardware in terms of people, like the jobs, consumer sectors as well. So, actually, Leonard, at this juncture, since you're a trade expert, I want to jump right back into our discussion on technology. And I want to ask you what counters you would suggest for our viewers to be looking out for in this area. So, maybe as a start, we have this chart over here that shows us the top performing counters in the past week. Maybe you could start off on telling us what are your thoughts on these companies.
Okay, so like I mentioned earlier, to bridge the physical divide, there's always technology. So this is where I can say that what is being presented here, Fastly, Bandwidth, Citrix, Slack, and CrowdStrike, all are different aspects or the parts of what comprises infrastructure. And one of the possibly reasons why Fastly is so highly traded is that the highlight that they are a CDN provider. So, and not just a CDN. Let me cover what CDN. CDN is like pushing, having hubs like a community mall. That's where they are cloning the content and pushing it out to the end user quicker and faster. Just like your Netflix streaming that is continuously done, rather than having a server from the US, you might be having it streamed from a server in Japan or Hong Kong, which is nearer to you. So that's where CDNs or the content distributor networks come in, and that's where Fastly is famous for. So not just that, they provide turnkey solutions, for example, like Google Spreadsheets or cloud-based technology that will also help with not just your leisure needs, you also have your corporate needs like the Google Sheets. So all this comes to bring Fastly to be a more valuable company. Probably maybe that's the reason why it is highly traded. So whereas like the rest of the tech companies that is shown here, there are other parts of the whole, I would say the being of the infrastructure. Slack, one example would be the messaging content. Citrix would be the virtualization. So these are different areas of the technology, the tree of technology, I would say. So Fastly is the one that is crucial now, that brings the most value to people. That's why probably is the highest turnover.
So, mentioned quite a bit about how the Trump administration and the policies that will be possibly will come from the administration after the election. So, I want to just zero in on that, and I want to draw your attention to the financial sector, which I reckon is another sector that is of prime concern. So, market watchers say that the sector will benefit the most from the businessman approach of the Trump administration. Does this resonate with you, Leonard?
Correct. So with every business, you need a banker. So that's where this FDIC quarterly banking profile would present a very quick proxy, a barometer of the financial sector in both I would say, the Obama administration and the Trump administration. So as you can see on the left portion of it, a majority of it from like '09 to 2016, 17, it is quite flattish, as you can see. So this is the net interest or the net operating revenue of financial institutions. So you can see it's quite a plateau. But on the right side itself, what I want to show you is that under the Trump administration, it is creeping upwards. You can see the trajectory and the upward sloping of the revenue trend. It is there. And if Trump were to continue his administration from next Tuesday onwards, it could continue the same trajectory with lower taxes for Wall Street as well as less regulations.
Right, Leonard. So is there any specific counters in this sector that you reckon our viewers should be looking at as well?
I would say broad-based. You can look at broad-based in terms of which financial institutions that you'll be interested that fits your investing profile, and then you can do a lookup on the prospectus of the company, the annual report, and then make a more informed decision from there.
Thanks, Leonard. So now, other than these two sectors, what other sectors should viewers be looking out for should a Trump win come about next week?
Trump itself would be energy. So energy is one area that you can see that the oil and gas industry would naturally have a boom from a Trump win. Whereas if like the charts that are shown now, if it's a Biden win, Biden would be more green focused. So from the energy point of view, if it's a Trump win, it is the old school traditional coal, oil, gas, and then if it's the Biden's win, it will be more green based. It will be solar, hydro. It could be a little bit of nuclear, and you can see from the Morningstar's 2030 power generation forecast that we have over here. This is in collaboration with the US Energy Information Administration. So that's where they combine industry outlooks together with the private sector survey. There is a doubling of, you can see the largest portion from 11% to 22% on renewables. So there's a green conscious that comes along with a Biden win when it comes to energy.
Right, Leonard. So maybe at this juncture, I just want to ask you to for your broad-based thoughts on how overall the markets will benefit from a Trump administration win. We will talk about the Biden win and the effects of that in the next session.
So from the Trump point of view, it is, you can say he would support industries that would hire a lot of people, rather than we compare with a Biden win where it is he is more tactical, more surgical in trying to improve employment. So in which Trump would go ahead with financial sectors, the energy sector, and infrastructure. So that's key to employing more and more. That means to give employment to the US economy. So you can see when you, in traditional leadership, when you talk to the leaders themselves and you gain their buy-in, and usually when it will cascade down to employment down the pipeline. So that's where, from a Trump perspective, he looks more like a businessman in gaining more value out of the business community within the US economy.
Right. So thanks, Leonard, for that insightful comments, and especially on how the Trump administration will affect the different sectors, as well as how you reckon the markets will perform in the short term should he win next Tuesday. So in terms of next week to our viewers, I'm sure it's hard to say with certainty on how the outcome of the elections will affect the markets, but we'll try to look into how a Biden administration win will affect the different counters as well as the overall market as well. So with that, we have come to the end of this week's Brokers Digest. To our viewers, we hope you have found these strategies that Leonard has shared helpful, and they help you in your investment decisions during this uncertain market outlook as we lead up to the elections. For more analysis on how the elections will affect the stock market, you can visit TD Ameritrade's Education Center or the Investing 101 page on the Edge Singapore website. Do like us on Facebook and Instagram to be alerted on next week's episode, where we'll be touching on part 2 of how the elections will affect the markets and the various counters in the short run, especially with a focus on a Biden win. We will be also discussing other investment tips that you won't want to miss. I'm Amala Balakrishna. With me is Leonard, and we'll see you again next week. Take care. Goodbye.